Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Connect Plus webinar. It's a series that we call Win the Amenities Race, Connect Your Building with Customized Transportation Solutions. Today's webinar is titled Bicycle Amenities, Making Bikeshare Work in Edge Cities. My name's Justin Shore. I will be the moderator for today. I'm a principal with Wells & Associates, and I lead our TDM planning practice. My colleague, Courtney Menjivar, who you may have been receiving emails from, leads our TDM operations practice, and amongst other things is the technical wizard behind the webinar series. Just a quick little bit about Wells. We're a multidisciplinary transportation firm, and our mission is to meet the needs of a mobile society, which we try to do through four key things: full service traffic engineering, transportation planning, transportation amenity design, installation, and management, as well as personal travel assistance. Before we dive into our webinar today, there's a few housekeeping items that I wanted to bring up with all of you. First of all, as you probably heard when you logged in, all audience members are in listen-only mode, and that's so that our panelists can present without any disruptions. However, if you do have questions, you'll be able to enter them in the control panel on the right of your screen under the chat section, if you look there. Out of respect to our panelists, we ask if you can hold those questions until the end. Even just seeing it pop up on the screen can be a little disruptive. But if you have to jump off before the end of the call or before we get to the Q&A, please feel free to type it in there. We'll have about 10 to 15 minutes after the presentations for the audience to ask our panelists any questions that they may have. Another housekeeping item, you'll note there are handouts available for download, and it's in the control center under the handouts section, again, to the right of your screen. You should note that this webinar will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be made available to all our registrants by close of business tomorrow. And finally, I think we feel it's the most important thing. If there will be a survey at the end of the webinar, and we ask if you would please take a minute to fill it out so we can learn how to make these webinars as meaningful as possible to you and other attendees at future webinars. So with that housekeeping information done, let me talk about in general our webinar series. The question that we've been asking as part of this webinar series is, who is winning the amenities race? And if you've been to one of our prior two webinars, you'll know we focused on the fact that industry leaders feel that the people winning the amenities race are people who are focusing on mobility, transportation, and sustainability. So our 6-part webinar series is designed to answer who is providing these solutions nationwide. Throughout the webinar series, we showcase examples of properties from across the country that have figured out creative ways to position themselves ahead of the pack by connecting with customized transportation solutions. In the process, these examples are enriching the value of properties and assets. So that's the series as a whole. Today, our focus is on bicycle amenities, and particularly the role of Bikeshare as an amenity. And if you're like me and my colleagues, it seems that no matter where you look in cities of all sizes across the US and the world, you'll find that some form of bikeshare system exists. But what you typically hear about are the success stories of bikeshare systems popping up in urban settings that are already bike-friendly and sort of multimodal environments. But you don't hear as much about bikeshare in suburban environments that are more auto-dominated in nature or maybe auto-dominated in reputation. So we wanted to use this webinar to explore 3 things. One is, where is bikeshare being implemented in challenging auto-dominated situations? 2, why is bikeshare considered an amenity at properties in these less bike-friendly environments? And 3, how is bikeshare being used by tenants at properties that are funding these types of bikeshare stations? So our panel will examine these questions from 2 perspectives. One is from being a national operator of bikeshare, and asking the question or answering the question, where is this operator seeing bikeshare being offered as an amenity in a suburban context? We'll also look from the property owner's perspective and ask some questions like, in a quintessential edge city, which is more an auto-dominant environment, why is bike share an amenity even worth pursuing and investing in? And what lessons can be learned by other property owners in suburban edge city environments? So with that background on today's webinar, we'll start our panel with the national perspective and looking at bike share as an amenity from Zagster. With us today from Zagster is Bradley Erickson. Bradley is a sales manager on the real estate side of Zagster's practice. And as Zagster's most tenured sales professional, Bradley manages national partnerships with real estate companies all over the US. He's partnered with over 150 properties across all asset types to deliver customized asset-branded bike sharing. And really focusing on driving real value for the occupier and the landlord alike. So I've had the pleasure of collaborating with Bradley on a number of real estate-focused bike share efforts across the DC region. And it's through that context that I was able to bring Bradley on this panel today, and it's my pleasure to now turn the panel over to Bradley to talk about the operator's perspective on bike share. Bradley?
Great, thank you, Justin. Hi, everyone. My name is Bradley Erickson. As Justin mentioned, with over 200 properties across the United States, including some national partnerships with companies like Hines, CBRE, and now they operate largely under two brands. One is Zagster, the one that we'll mainly talk about today. That's the customizable private bike share for properties, which ends up being asset branded, insured, and turnkey for each community. And the second is Pace, a consumer-based national bike share network that allows our property partners to host bike share racks for free. But what we'll talk today about is more specifically Zagster. See if I can jump around here. What we're really seeing here is that workplace amenities are winning the war for talent. The common denominator of these Zagster two offerings and other bike share options that you see out there in the world is that this focus on workplace amenities. And now amenities are like bike share, never going to be in the top 3 reasons why someone would take a job with a company. But we're seeing a big shift in workplace values, particularly within millennials who are making up a bigger share of the workforce ever. This workforce doesn't share the same old mentality that self-worth is defined by the kind of car you drive or the size of your office. The companies.
Excuse me, Bradley. Hey,
yeah.
Hey, Bradley. I'm sorry. Your audio is a little broken up. We may need you to call back from a landline, or I don't know if you're calling in on a voice over IP.
Yeah, I'm on a landline. I could try to redial in.
No, that sounds much clearer. Whatever you did sounds much better.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. So the companies you see here have really built their culture around trying to make their employees feel connected to work without sacrificing personal time. So, the things that Google has made very popular, like barbershops and dry cleaning, fitness centers, on-site restaurants and cafes, along with newer amenities like bike share, Tesla charging stations, and shuttles, all combined for a meaningful amenity offering. Why that's important and relevant for developers, particularly with you all today, is that companies, your customers, are gravitating towards a vibrant and accessible community, which allows their employees, again, going back to the focus on talent, to live and work in a more sustainable, sociable, and efficient environment. These vibrant, inspirational spaces improve lives, make people happier, and because of that, carry a premium with what companies are willing to pay up in rent for perks. Naturally with this, there's an uplift in property values, which is incentivizing for both long-term developers and short-term build-to-flip companies. But Bikeshare alone won't accomplish all of this. I wouldn't come here and say that just delivering Bikeshares is going to have a guaranteed uplift in property value. But what I see really successful is a menu of mobility options that developers are putting together. You've always seen in development world construction along transit lines, right? That's been the case for making your property more accessible for an easier commute. But now more and more developers are thinking beyond the commute to and from work and thinking about transportation options during the workday. So Deloitte put out a recent report called Innovations in Commercial Real Estate, and they even went so far as to suggest that developers work with startups that do ride sharing, like Uber and Lyft, car share, like Zipcar, and bike share, like Zagster, who specialize in these offers specifically. And they summarize this really well. They say that shifting mobility patterns will have a material impact on the valuation of your property, your client's location decisions, where future real estate is going to develop, and the type of tenants you want to accomplish, you want to target. So two examples of Zagster work with today are, the first is Irvine Company's Santa Clara Square. So it's a mixed-use suburban campus in the Santa Clara area outside the San Francisco Bay Area, where Bikeshare is a cornerstone of their Kinetic Workplace Wellness brand. Their Kinetic brand is a portfolio offering designed to market around a package of amenities that is really focused on a healthy and wellness living style. So there's fitness centers and personal training, there's massage rooms and on-demand fitness classes. And Bikeshare here is marketed along with the obvious topics that we've talked about so far, like on-campus transportation, but it's also marketed towards a healthy option to get out during the day. So we see a lot of feedback from our riders there that they're taking a bike with their boss to have a one-on-one during the day instead of staying inside, or going on a team outing and just getting some fresh air. So when you make bikes available on demand for free, and it's super easy, you start to see riders tell their own value story, and Irvine Company is particularly receptive to the wellness and fitness focus of that. And finally, Rockwood Capital's Playa Jefferson asset. It's in the LAX creative office kind of suburban area outside Los Angeles, and it's a creative campus that's designed by Gensler, and they really wanted to focus on building a culture of inspiring companies and creative and inspiring amenities. So they approached us even before this was occupied and said, hey, we want food trucks and a private bike share program, outdoor sports tables like ping pong, football. They got a whole cool creative companies before setting aside a chunk of their campus for a corner tenant. They used the package of all these amenities and ended up signing Facebook's largest hotel office to a long-term lease. So Facebook did not decide to move into Playa Jefferson for Bikeshare or tables alone. It was something the developers thought that their leasing team wanted to take advantage of and use as part of the conversation. So all in all, what we're really seeing is sort of a redefining of the very character of a suburban office park. And the modern workforce is creating a creative, amenitized, really mixed-use live-work environment. And forward-thinking developers are acting now to capitalize on that. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Bradley. I think I may have inadvertently took over control of your screen. So sorry if you needed us to advance to the next slide for you, or you're good.
I'm good.
Any last comments on your part? Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bradley. And two great examples from the West Coast. We have, Bay Area and Los Angeles, which is wonderful. And, your insights about the fact that this is one piece of the puzzle in mobility, I think is really helpful and insightful as well. It needs to be part of a larger package. In both cases, there's a larger theme going on. So flying back from the West Coast to the East Coast, we'll transition to the part of the webinar where we talk about Bikeshare as an amenity from the perspective of the owner. And our next panelist is with Washington REIT. It's my pleasure to introduce Anthony Chang, who's the Vice President of Asset Management for Washington REIT. Anthony has dedicated his career to repositioning office buildings, having added value to some of the world's most prestigious addresses. And he's leased office space with a value in excess of $350 million and transacted over $900 million in dispositions. But in addition, Anthony has a passion for connecting others and building community. And I'll tell you, just from a personal perspective, I've run into Anthony at numerous ULI and NAIOP events, and he's always the person introducing me to other people, introducing other people to other people. This is something he really does live. But a great example where he has repositioned an office building with creative amenities is at Silverline Center in Tysons, Virginia, which is an edge city about 20 miles outside of Washington, D.C. And it's in that context that I first had the opportunity to work with Anthony as we were exploring Bikeshare options together through the Tysons partnership. It was clear at that point that Anthony had laser-focused vision and honestly fearless leadership helping advance Bikeshare and Tysons. And that's the story that Anthony will be sharing with us today. So without further ado, Anthony, we turn the panel over to you, and you have full control to move forward. Anthony Chang.
Thank you so much, Justin. That's a heck of an introduction, and thanks so much for having me. I think the story we wanted to share is really an incredible public-private partnership, and talking about our repositioning of Silverline Center and Tysons Corner, what the Tysons partnership likes to call the next great American city. It may be a little small. On the left side, you see the Capital Bikeshare map of Tysons. And our location is Bikeshare Station number 11 to orient everyone. It's pretty close to the major interchange. And then the metro station that we're closest to is Bikeshare Station number 8, which I don't know for those of you who may or may not be able to see my mouse. That's right there. Just a brief note about Washington REIT. For those of you that don't know us, we own and operate uniquely positioned real estate assets in the Washington, D.C. market. We create value by transforming insights into strategy and strategy into action. This is a great example of that. Our portfolio of 49 properties includes more than 6.3 million square feet of commercial space and more than 4,200 multifamily apartment units, and our shares trade on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker WRE. Okay, enough of that. So this is, I think Bradley covered it very well philosophically, that the world is changing and the amenities race continues to get more aggressive. And as part of our redevelopment of Silverline Center, we basically said we want to give tenants everything they want and more. In addition to a 7-minute walk from Metro, which just opened a couple years ago, we said we want incredible convening meeting spaces that you see on the upper left corner. We want a world-class fitness center that's operated by One-to-One Fitness. A couple famous NFL quarterbacks have been known to train in this facility. We put in 10 Penn fine dining establishment as represented in the lower left image, and you see a killer conference facility that just gets tons of use. So the thinking is, what else do we need to offer? And biking is a very important component of that. This is a very flat, accessible area of Tysons that you can get to all the major bike trails. And commuting in Tysons, which is otherwise like most other edge cities, has historically just been car dominant. but that's changing as millennials and as older people just see the value in the wellness and exercise of biking. So this seeking new solutions, when we finished the repositioning in 2015, we moved the leasing needle from 63% occupied to 97%. And the challenge is when that happens is really we get a parking crunch. And I think we're seeing that throughout Tyson's right now as these new tenants want denser environments and open office environments. Their parking ratios are outstripping the standard market-based parking allowances. And the multimodal solutions, Metro is a huge component of that, but we also saw Bikeshare being a very important component of that to encourage that Metro connection and encourage more people. So selfishly, Washington REIT said, okay, how do we get a Bikeshare station in front of our building to reduce the 7-minute walk to the Metro station? And a little bit of background, taking that kernel of an idea and working with Tyson's partnership, their leadership, really thanks to Michael Kaplan and Matt Smith. Matt is the director of transportation. They had the credibility to broker a deal amongst all the owners that are interested and forward-thinking enough to say, yes, we are willing to put our own money in place if that means we can dictate that our building will get our own Bikeshare station and link it with the county. And the county was pretty far down the line and years invested in studies. I think this may sound familiar for those of you in the public sector and those that touch the public sector. Very deliberative process and studying Bikeshare for Reston and Reston Town Center. Those of you that know the area, it's further down the new Metro line that's been built closer to Dulles Airport. And Tyson's was a plan for a couple years later. And Washington REIT said, hey, we were willing to use our money to build a Bikeshare station. And Michael Kaplan, then the executive director of Tyson's Partnership, said, really? And I said, I'll bet other owners are willing to put their money on the line too. So it's fascinating. We basically put $75,000 commitment that we could pay over 5 years. The county would effectively be the bank and pay for all the funds up front, and we're now paying the county back. The county's Department of Transportation maintains the stations. And Tyson's Partnership takes a nominal amount of revenue that they're managing, and they were responsible for installing the 3 Metro stations. So it was truly a win-win-win that would not have been possible without the Tyson's Partnership to connect the owners like us and the county and have the credibility to launch it. And we effectively were able to bring Bikeshare to Tyson's, which is call it the 12th largest central business district in the country, years ahead of schedule, which we could not be more thrilled to have kind of our small part in that outcome. We had to justify, obviously, internally that this was, an unbudgeted expense. It was a significant repositioning, and we had to justify the spend. And we surveyed our tenants. 20% of the tenants surveyed at this location said they would use Bikeshare at least once per month. 10% said they'd use it once per week. And we said, okay, good. We're hearing people would use it. And I think when you link it back to the parking, if this building has structured underground parking, if every parking space from a developer's perspective is worth anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 per space, and we can get 10% of our 500,000 square foot building to use Bikeshare and take Metro instead of parking, this becomes an incredible component of our multimodal strategy to just relieve the stress of the parking transformation that's happening in this market. Another component, I mentioned that we brought in fine dining to this location with 10 Penn. We also have artisanal coffee shop called Bourbon Coffee. According to a Virginia Tech survey, 66% of Bikeshare users are actually going to a retail destination. We were seeking to take a 7-minute walk from Metro down to 3 or 4, but we saw the benefit of potentially other people in the Bikeshare network potentially using Bikeshare to come to our restaurants and coffee shops and retailers during the day. End result, the punchline, I think when we measure success, we take a very quantitative approach, and thanks to Justin and Wells and Connect Plus, we have kind of the actual performance of Bikeshare over Enticance over the last 12 months in 2017. Silverline Center in red is the busiest non-metro station in Enticance by a long shot, and the only busier station is the metro station that our building is serviced by. So you can see that when we walked it, 7 minutes, it's relatively flat. I think the market has responded, and it's resounding. Is it just the commute? Is it just retail? I think we'd love to get more color on that as we let this play out. But the bottom line is it's truly being used, and we couldn't be more thrilled with the outcome. And that's our story in a nutshell.
It's a great story, Anthony. Thank you so much. The public-private partnership is such a wonderful story, and it's great to hear when that happens. But it takes leadership from people like you, who are willing to be the first one out of the gate to say we're willing to spend the money, county, and help motivate and move them to take action. So although we are at the end of our 30-minute scheduled webinar, we still would like to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions. So hopefully Bradley and Anthony can hang on for just a few more minutes, and we ask our audience to stick around with us as well, because we're likely to get some great questions here. So we're opening up the floor to questions. And while we wait for those to come in, I have a couple that I'd like to ask Bradley first, and then Anthony. So Bradley, given the fact you've got a huge portfolio from across the country, 150 different properties that you've worked with, what types of suburban properties do you find are the ones that are most interested in the privately funded Bikeshare stations? Obviously, you guys do publicly funded ones as well. But where do you find that it's most common to see a privately funded Bikeshare station in the suburban context?
Yeah, great question, Justin. A lot of the inbound interest that we get is overwhelmingly on two categories. So new developments, developers are starting to plan Bikeshare into the asset ahead of time. So, a couple of years before actual construction, architecture firms and designers are coming to us and asking about our Bikeshare space requirements and use cases and how it might interact. So a lot of brand new buildings are building this as a standard. And at the flip side of the spectrum, see a lot of older buildings that are coming to us and they're going through sort of redevelopment. Maybe it's just marketing or as simple as a facelift. And Bikeshare has an appeal because it's visible. Right. I mean, a couple of years ago, we saw a huge focus on green construction, sustainable construction, and those LED lights in the building and some other sustainable amenities aren't super visible in your casual day-to-day conversation with a potential occupier of space. So a lot of companies that are just going through even a smaller remarketing or repositioning of their asset are thinking of Bikeshare right outside their building as sort of a visible trophy. So those are the two big categories of inbound interest that we've received for the past couple of years.
Very interesting, and very much in alignment with what Anthony was describing and sort of repositioning on that end of the spectrum. Awesome. Thank you, Bradley. Anthony, on your end, the question we have is, you've had this pretty unique experience with Silverline Center and Tyson's, and now you've kind of seen it go from initiation to implementation. You showed us some numbers. Would you consider putting a Bikeshare station at another suburban site in your current or maybe even your future portfolio? and if so, what are the qualities that you would be seeking when you put in a bike share station?
Yeah, great question. I think if we look across our portfolio and we say which buildings would benefit, I think it's those buildings that aren't right on top of metro, and you're thinking about that last mile solution to just create a little bit more joy in your life in getting to the office or your apartment. I think those are the locations where we say, can we take that 10-minute walk and make it shorter? Those would be critical. Or is there some magnet amenity that's nearby that would be absolutely critical? And I think this notion of shuttles as metro expands into the suburbs, a lot of private owners like us are spending big dollars on shuttle services. That's every year. And if bike share becomes a better option instead of a shuttle that you have to wait, right? If you can just take matters into your own hands, which is what we found in surveying tenants at Silverland Center, whether they wanted a shuttle or not, they could walk. It takes 7 minutes, right? Or they could bike and smile a little bit more. I think that's the tension that we're looking at in those options, whether it's a shuttle, whether it's a metro access, whether it's key anchor amenities nearby.
That's great, Anthony. And, the last point that you made, I think, is really interesting because that for those folks in the audience that attended our first webinar, that was a big part of what we talked about was shuttles being expensive, and different properties across the country are starting to look at ride hailing as an interim solution. But interesting, point that you bring up is it could also be bike share. Both sort of last mile solutions that are really you're only paying for as people use them, sort of on an on-demand basis. Or you can have more cost-effective, bike share solutions that are much cheaper than shuttles.
Yeah, absolutely. And given it's a heavy lift to get a public jurisdiction to commit to something like this, I would say if they did not, we would absolutely be Bradley's client and figure it out to get the 2 stations set up at the metro and at our building.
Great. Thank you, Anthony. This next, we have time for one, well, we've gone over, but we have one more question that we want to make sure we get out there for our audience. And I think this may be best suited for Bradley, actually. Bradley, the question is, I've been seeing Lime bikes, e-bikes that are dockless in my neighborhood. Is the industry heading that way? I guess number one, and then the next question is electric over traditional bikes as part of the dockless bike share, systems that are being set up.
Yeah, great question, Justin. And obviously, top of mind in the industry. What Dockless, in our opinion, has done over the past year or so, there's been a lot of money poured in venture capital, particularly out of China, where that model is a bit more popular than it is in the States, has really made bike share a household conversation, something that everyone's familiar with. But we at Zagster think that it's sort of a reaction to the legacy docked model. So we do think that docked-based bike share put bike share on the map in North America a few years ago, and it's been very successful in DC, New York, and Chicago. And Dockless helps fill some of those gaps and the frictions, right? Going to a dock and having it be filled, or trying to go to a destination that doesn't have a dock. And obviously those docks come along with a very large upfront expense for the host. Dockless helps answer some of those questions, but it also creates some other issues, right? The concepts around leaving a bike in front of something that may block somebody with disabilities, or things like that. So we really think at Zagster that bikes should be locked to things. So it's kind of a middle ground between the legacy docked model that you see in major metro areas and the likes of Lime Bike and Spin, where you can leave the bike anywhere. So what we're trying to do is give riders the freedom to go where they want with a lock that's on the bike, but help make sure that our developer customers have a bike share solution that fits their brand, that doesn't have bikes laying everywhere, and is safe and predictable for everyone involved. So we're trying to straddle that middle ground and make a dockless model that has some limitations where you can lock a bike to anything. Your second question about electrified bikes, I think it's really great. There's a lot of companies like Jump, who just had a partnership with Uber, who are really advancing the hardware piece of electrified bikes, and I think it's great overall for the industry, because it could be a point in getting someone that may not think of themselves as a cyclist to get on a bike, have a pedal assist bike that they can ride, and it's a little bit easier than they otherwise might have thought. What I'm excited to see the industry evolve is operators figure out the logistics behind that. It's a lot of heavy lifting to make sure that assets that have two wheels and move around in unpredictable ways are charged and appropriately maintained, and that's going to be a huge focus on whichever operator wins in the space is to make sure that there's a logistics and maintenance plan in place for bikes that can move faster and go to greater places. So I'm excited to see the industry evolve.
We are as well, and appreciate that really thoughtful answer there, Bradley. Also appreciate the fact that you guys were able to stay a little longer to answer these questions. We have one more which we'll have to follow up with and maybe distribute to our audience what your answer is. Came in from Spain, which was a very interesting question, but for the sake of our audience, we're going to take this opportunity to wrap up the webinar and try to keep it as close to our original end time as possible. Just to remind everybody, as the webinar ends, please take the survey. We want to know what we can do better to make these more meaningful and useful to you. Also, just a reminder, today's webinar will be available for download tomorrow. It has been recorded, and we'll be sending out an email with that. Our future webinar topics are about information dissemination. So next month, we'll discuss the amenity value of real-time travel information and customized travel planning assistance. So hope you all can join us for that. And then we'll keep you posted on our future topics as well. But before we end the webinar today, Anthony, Bradley, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with our audience. Great stories on both of your parts and wonderful resources to the folks in the property management and real estate space who are looking for bike share as that last mile solution. I imagine we'll have people who will be looking to reach out to you, and we'll ask, as those folks are looking for your contact information, we'll put them in touch with you guys so we can keep the good mobility advancement that you all are doing spreading nationally. So thank you both again for your time, and thank you to our audience for joining us today. We'll look forward to having you all back with us in April or March. It's still February. We'll see you all in March. Thanks, everybody.